Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is clear as day that both the Europeans and the Democrats are conspiring to drag us right into World War III. We've got Zelensky saying the war is a very, very long way from ending. We've got the UK saying they're willing to put boots on the ground and planes in the skies. And we're also finding out that it was the Democrats who are responsible for the blow up in the Oval Office after telling Zelensky to reject Donald Trump's deal. As always, like the video and subscribe to the channel to make sure that every video can reach every subscriber. But let's start with Zelensky showing just how entitled he thinks he is to US support when he says that the United States is soon going to have to send their sons and daughters.
The U.S. will have to send their sons and daughters exactly the same way as we are sending their sons and daughters to war, and they will have to fight because it's NATO that we're talking about, and they will be dying.
This is exactly what Donald Trump meant when he said that he was empowering Zelensky to be a tough guy, and it was clouding his judgment, not allowing him to logically look at the situation on the ground and realize that it is in his best interest and his country's best interest if he comes to the peace table. He also said today in an AP interview that the end of war with Russia is very, very far away, which prompted Donald Trump to respond on Truth Social saying, "This is the worst statement that could have been made by Zelensky, and America will not put up with it for much longer. Yes, we're not playing these games." It is what I was saying. This guy doesn't want there to be peace as long as he has America's backing. And Europe, in the meeting they had with Zelensky, stated flatly that they cannot do the job without the US. Probably not a great statement to have made in terms of a show of strength against Russia. What are they thinking? And I'll show you a bit of that meeting later. This guy Zelensky has gone mad with power. And if not to illustrate my point perfectly, here he is after the meeting that he had with Donald Trump, saying that elections aren't going to stop him from being president. Only NATO membership will.
If I am to be changed and I'll hear, how can I put it? With what's happening with the support to change me, it will not be easy, because it is not enough to simply hold elections. You would need to prevent me from participating in the elections. And it will be a bit more difficult, so they'll have to negotiate with me. And I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership. And then it means that I fulfilled my mission. There is NATO. It means I've fulfilled my mission.
So while we're all supposedly siding with Russia because we want this war to end and won't stand up for our democratic allies, as the Democrats like to say, the president of Ukraine literally just said that elections won't stop him from becoming president. It's funny because all authoritarians justify their authoritarianism by saying there's some sort of mission, some sort of goal, some objective that has to be accomplished, and they're the only ones to do it. And the objective is always so vague or so impossible that they're essentially anointing themselves leader for life. This guy is so hell-bent on getting back the 10% of Ukraine that's under Russia control that he's willing to start an entire world war, which will most likely be fought on Ukraine's soil, destroy his entire country in the process, but be able to rule over ashes with a border that he's happy with. So we see that Zelensky doesn't want peace. He actually wants World War III, which is pretty crazy. But also, apparently, so does the UK. Here's their prime minister saying they will put boots on the ground and planes in the skies. Watch.
First, we will keep the military aid flowing and keep increasing the economic pressure on Russia to strengthen Ukraine now. Second, we agreed that any lasting peace must ensure Ukraine's sovereignty and security, and Ukraine must be at the table. Third, in the event of a peace deal, we will keep boosting Ukraine's own defensive capabilities to deter any future invasion. Fourth, we will go further to develop a coalition of the willing to defend a deal in Ukraine and to guarantee the peace. Not every nation will feel able to contribute, but that can't mean that we sit back. Instead, those willing will intensify planning now with real urgency. The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting. But to support peace in our continent and to succeed, this effort must have strong US backing.
So he's not even trying to hide the fact that he wants a global conflict. He didn't even try to give it a layer of obscurity. He just flat out said, and we need the US to support this. Because if they put soldiers on the ground and planes in the sky, and those soldiers engage with Russian soldiers, England will just invoke Article 5 and then all the NATO countries have to jump in. And they know they can't do it without the United States, so they're basically saying, if you guys don't back this plan, then we'll just cause World War III. These European leaders are so hypocritical. They keep posturing for the cameras and for social media, saying how Europe stands with Ukraine, Europe's gonna increase their defense, Europe's gonna start a European army, Europe's gonna bolster European defense, and then immediately beg the United States to make their plans a reality. Zelensky just said in an interview, if the United States were to stop funding Ukraine, they would need $250 billion from Europe. So I looked at the most recent NATO funding because I was curious, and $430 billion comes from Europe and from Canada. And these countries fail to consistently meet their NATO requirements. So Zelensky is demanding for essentially a 50% increase on what they're contributing to NATO to go directly to him. Then they have to increase NATO spending. Then they have to increase their own country's defense spending. And where are they going to get this money from? Again, I'm thrilled that these European citizens who always have something disparaging to say about how America is run, despite living in a socialist fantasy full of free everything on the backs of the US military, are going to have all of that cut because they don't want to follow the United States lead and they want to continue this forever war in Europe. Okay, so we've seen what Zelensky's doing to try to start World War III. We see what Europe is trying to do to start World War III. Now let's see what the Democrats themselves are trying to do to start World War III.
So Senator Graham said that he was trying to help Zelensky before he went to the Oval Office, coaching him what to say, what not to say. Were you part of those conversations?
Well, I can't speak to every conversation that Senator Graham had, but yes, I met with President Zelensky that morning, and President Zelensky was ready to sign that minerals agreement, no matter how insufficient it was, but had an obligation to have a conversation with the President of the United States about the disaster that would be wrought for Ukraine if they signed an agreement that didn't have Zelensky at the table and trusted Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is not to be trusted. And so Zelensky had an obligation to raise that issue. And Vance seized on that moment to start a litany of Russia-baked talking points.
So Chris Murphy, the guy you just saw, he is a radical anti-Trump leftist. And him, along with Chuck Schumer and other Democrats, actually sabotaged the mineral deal with Trump and Zelensky. Hours before the meeting that took place in the White House, they actually convinced Zelensky to make a big deal in front of the cameras about the lack of security guarantees. Only someone as thick-skulled as a Democrat can't see that the mineral rights deal is the security guarantee, while also appeasing Russia by not allowing Ukraine to join NATO. These Democrats are so Trump deranged, they're actively undermining peace deals, and then have the gall to say that if we're for peace, we're somehow siding with Putin. No, encouraging this war to continue, which will ultimately lead to the end of Ukraine because they don't have enough bodies to throw at Russia, and then Russia just walks right in and takes all of it. That is the side that Putin wants. Putin would love to keep this war going on for years, lose 1 million of his people, lose 1 million Ukrainians, because at the end of the day, he will still have people left over and the Ukrainians won't. And while we're trying to clean up our own financial mess here at home and not get into expensive and endless wars, the Democrats are seemingly against cutting costs in the government while also being for spending more through this war. So now we've seen how the Democrats also want World War III. And their Trump derangement at this point is losing them any shred of credibility that they might have had left. And Marco Rubio reiterates this as he says, if this was any other president than Trump, people would be trying to give him the Nobel Peace Prize.
I just don't get it. I really don't, other than the fact that it's Donald J. Trump. If this was a Democrat that was doing this, everyone would be saying, well, he's on his way to the Nobel Peace Prize. This is absurd. We are trying to end a war. You cannot end a war unless both sides come to the table, starting with the Russians. And that is the point the president has made. And we have to do whatever we can to try to bring them to the table to see if it's even possible. I'm not promising you it's possible. I'm not telling you it's 90% likely. I'm saying it's 0% likely if we don't get them to a negotiating table. And the sooner everyone grows up around here and figures out that this is a bad war that's heading in a bad direction with death and destruction and all kinds of dangers surrounding it that could spiral into a broader conflict, the sooner people grow up and realize that, I think the more progress we're going to be able to make. But the president's crystal clear. He campaigned on it, and he's going to govern on it. And that is, he is going to be a president that tries to achieve peace.
Again, I just don't understand the Democrat and the European and the Ukrainian philosophy that we won't stop the bloodshed today unless you can guarantee me that there will be no bloodshed 10 years from now. Parking NATO right up on Russia's doorstep is a great thing for Ukraine. I get it. I see why they want it. But it is quite literally the worst thing possible for the United States, especially when we see how Zelensky acts when he feels like he's enabled behind us. The Democrats have nothing to do with their time besides criticize every single thing that Donald Trump is doing, offer no alternative plan on literally any issue, and then be so Trump deranged and war hungry that they're saying anybody who desires peace isn't a true American. You're not a true patriot. You're actually standing with Russia. The argument is so intellectually dishonest. So if Putin says that a Hershey bar tastes good, and I also agree with that, now I'm standing with Russia, aligning myself with Russia, moving away from my allies. I mean, just give me a break. And just like everything else, the Democrats are deciding to take the most unpopular side of every single issue they can, simply to be a Trump resistance. Look at this CNN poll that shows that an overwhelming amount of Americans want a peace deal.
Let's talk about the idea of a peace deal. And again, the way you ask this matters, but go ahead.
The way you ask it is important, so we can talk about this a little bit. So the poll question essentially is, do you support a Russia-Ukraine negotiated peace deal? The vast majority of Americans, this is what they want. 78% say that they support this idea versus just 16% oppose. Of course, as we were talking about, does this question actually get at what's going on right now? I think you would say that it probably does not necessarily get what's going on right now.
No, the question asked, do you support a Russia-Ukraine negotiated peace deal? Ukraine's not there at the negotiations in Saudi Arabia this week, so the people were not asked this. And I do think, in general, if you ask anyone in any poll, do you support peace, peace tends to rate pretty highly.
Peace tends to win. You rarely get 78% of the country agreeing on anything. They do agree on the idea of a negotiated peace deal between Russia and Ukraine.
So even though it's clear an overwhelming majority of Americans want this war to end, the Democrats will see things like Times Square being flooded with a whole bunch of radical Trump deranged leftists with their Ukraine flags and think that represents the will of the American people. They still haven't figured out that their radical base, which is what lost them the election, is the loudest, the most whiny, the most vocal and out there. And so they consistently go against what the average ordinary American wants because they're so scared of getting some flack on X from their blue-haired base. Now, I'm not advocating for leaving NATO, but if these European allies that we're obliged to hop into war with are trying to strong-arm us and to keep funding this war, otherwise they're just going to get involved themselves, thus bringing us into it, I certainly think it should at least be evaluated if that's actually how little they think of us. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. And I will see you guys in the next one.